currently in the commanding position.
Yeah, it's funny with with a presidential debate, we can always tell who didn't do well by who has to come into the spin room afterwards, right? And like sort of put a sheen on whatever mistakes they might have made. We didn't get a spin room. So yeah, I agree with you. It didn't feel like anyone was either vanquished, and it didn't feel like anyone was really the clear winner. What do you think though was one of the biggest moments of the night, if you had to say?
I mean, one thing that stood out for me, and I would refer people to Vital City, vitalcitynyc.org, to do a little plug right now. Harry Siegel has an analysis up, and I basically agree with him, which is that the
Hmm.
exchange over Mamdani's planned rent freeze, which is an absolutely central campaign plank, was
Yeah.
really revealing. He has said that he has the power to preemptively order rents on stabilized units frozen for 4 years. And he was challenged on whether he actually has the authority to do that. The rent stabilization law says there are all kinds of factors that are supposed to go into determining what happens to rents year after year. And he would ignore many of those and order his rent stabilization board to simply freeze rents regardless. There's a serious question about whether he has the legal authority to do that. He kind of just blew through it and suggested that this is reparations almost for past mistakes, and that it didn't
Mhm.
matter what the data said. And that
Yeah.
is revealing, and it could create problems for him if and when he becomes mayor.
Yeah, I thought that moderators, I think it was Sally who was pushing him back and forth saying like, but you don't have the data yet. How would you, the data is next year's, how would you make a determination without data? That was really interesting. And I think if you wanted to see it, it was sort of exposing an inexperience or naivete, which if I were Cuomo or Sliwa, that's where I would go. Okay, let's talk about Mamdani's job last night. I think it was just to do no harm. I think you would agree, accomplished. Did he have other jobs? Was he introducing himself to New York voters for the first time? And if so, did that go well, do you think?
I think there were some voters that he was introducing himself to. Who knows exactly how many, because a lot of people have gotten to know him by now, at least by reputation. And I think on that score, he does pretty well. You know, he's very rehearsed. He knows his lines. He knows his platform. He sticks to the script. And it's a pretty well honed script at this point. That has a
Yes.
downside, possibly, but I think it's mostly upside when a lot of people are low information voters.
You know, I was going to ask you this question. I think I took it out, but yeah, was he too polished? Was he too scripted?
You know, something I saw Cuomo's team seize on that actually bothered me a little bit, and I don't want this to be a stage review, but you know, his smile, his little smile at the end of every section was clearly something that he had determined to do, but it looked
Yeah.
really same to me, and I wonder how it came across to people. I don't know.
Interesting. Okay. I thought he got a little banged up on Israel and police. He sort of admitted to like learning about historic Jewish suffering maybe this year for the first time. And he admitted he had learned about, the hard jobs that cops have to do like maybe this year. Um is that a problem for him?
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem. I don't think it's a debilitating problem, but it's certainly a problem. And Jewish voters make up a large portion of the electorate compared to almost any other place in the country.
Yeah.
Um, I think that he said some pretty uh, damning things about cops, and it was only 5 years ago. You know, he talked
Yeah.
about 2020 as though it was like forever ago. It may
Yeah.
feel like forever ago when you're a pretty young guy, but actually
Right.
it's not forever ago to most people. And those things were really said. And he can't
Yeah.
pretend that they didn't exist, nor does he really want to. He plays an interesting game, which is to say, he doesn't 100% disavow. He just tries to
Mhm.
say it's a different time. He didn't take down those tweets, for instance. And in some cases, he comes closer to completely disavowing. But
Mm.
I
Mhm.
think I don't think it's that damning in the end for his chances, but it is a problem, I would say.
I wonder how he'll do on those issues in the next debate. If he'll maybe clean up those answers at all, or if we'll see the kind of the same script. Josh, stay right there. I've got more questions for you after the break. More Battleground NYC after this. We're back with more Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. Let's get back to more from the debate with Josh Greenman, managing editor of Vital City. On the issue of inexperience, Josh, I think Cuomo and Sliwa did a good job painting Mamdani as unqualified and naive. Curtis Sliwa had these lines about the architect and the apprentice, referring to Cuomo and Mamdani, respectively. He talked about fantasies, right? The fantasy of Zohran Mamdani's ideas. Typically, voters we've talked to admit they don't care if Mamdani can't actually do a lot of the things he's talking about. So do you think that mattered?
It mattered, but if it hasn't gotten him, if he's still at close to 50% right now, I don't think it matters enough. And he
Yeah.
does in his public presentation clear the bar for people. That is the bottom line in many ways. If he were stammering, if he were unsteady, if he didn't have command of the facts, it would trouble people a lot more. But he is very tight in his public presentation. He seems to know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I am one of those who's troubled by plenty of his policies and disagree with
Mhm.
a lot of what he wants to do and how he wants to do it. But to many voters, if you just look at him for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, does he come off as way over his head? I don't think he does.
Yep. Let's talk about Cuomo. What was his job last night, and did he accomplish it?
I think he had two jobs. One was, to bring Mamdani down a peg or two or three, and the other was to build himself up. I
Mm.
think he did the first job, and I don't think he did the second job. And how many pegs he brought him down is, in the eye of the beholder. So I think that what was really missing from Cuomo was a well articulated, positive vision. He was able to hammer Mamdani again and again and again for all the things that you talked about.
Yeah.
And some of that will stick, and some of that will result in Mamdani's negatives going up. But Cuomo's got high negatives too, higher negatives, and he
Right.
needs people to have a reason to vote for him if he's going to win. And I don't think he gave many people that positive reason.
Josh, what did you make of his answer that Bill Clinton was his favorite modern day president? I know as a woman how I heard that. What did you think?
Well, I thought it was perplexing because look at any poll of like approval of living Democratic presidents, and Obama is way ahead of Clinton among Democrats. 20 points, I think, ahead of Clinton among Democrats. There are plenty of Democrats who have admiration for Bill Clinton, but not as many who support Obama. The other thing is Obama, had this one singular accomplishment, a big vision accomplishment, healthcare, and you can't say the same for Bill Clinton. So it's just a funny one to reach for, I think. And yes, I know what you were thinking, which is
Okay.
also
I'm not crazy. And additionally, if you are accused by 13 women of sexual harassment, maybe don't pick the president who was also accused of sexual assault.
fair point.
Okay. Cuomo, as you know, has a reputation for being kind of a bully. One strategy would be to lean into it and say, I'm tough and this is who I am and I'm going to, stand up to Trump and blah, blah, blah. Another would be to try to diffuse that reputation. Do you think he did either of those last night?
I think by his bearing, he always does the first. I don't think he has any other way of operating other than the first, because that's just who he is. He is, and it's a strength and a weakness at the same time for him. I mean, he is a commanding presence in many respects. He is capable of pushing people around, and that means he can get certain things done. But it also means he has trouble working with a lot of people.
Yeah, right. Let's talk about Curtis Sliwa. How did he do?
Oh, I think he did well. I mean, he probably didn't gain that many votes because this is a heavily, heavily Democratic city and Democratic leaning, even among the independents. But I think he was likable. I think he sounded down to earth. He had some kind of funny flubs, like saying that Governor George Pataki was his favorite, modern day president.
Yeah.
But he's a likable guy, and I think that the caricature of Sliwa is that he's clownish, and I think when you actually listen to him, he doesn't sound clownish. He sounds kind of reasonable in lots more respects than people expect. So I think he outperformed expectations.
Yeah, agree. I thought he sounded authentic. He obviously knows and loves the city. He, really leaned into that. And I think if you're someone like me, if you're like a security mom, right? Hearing him talk bluntly about crime probably resonated. I agree there's probably not enough Republicans in New York to get him over the line, but I can't wait to see the next polls. And speaking of, we'll talk to a pollster in our next block. Josh Greenman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, coming up, talk to our pollster about where we are in this race. More Battleground NYC after this. We're back with Battleground NYC, the fight for your vote. Joining me now for the bigger picture is Lee Miringoff, the director of Marist University Institute for Public Opinion. Lee, thanks for being here. It's so nice to have you.
My pleasure.
Okay, how do you, as a pollster, look at a debate like last night's and come up with the questions you're going to ask voters for a new poll to see what impact the debate had?
Yeah, and it's a very good question because polls sometimes drive the analysis, and now we had actually an event that can let public opinion react, and the polls can actually pick up on something that's real.
Yes,
I think in a lot of these polls, and ours included, I mean, it's all about timing. So in a sense, is today a day where everybody's talking about one flub that might move the trajectory of this race? And the answer, as you already indicated, is no. So the trajectory stays fairly similar. So what are we looking at? We're looking at people's reaction favorably or unfavorably to each of the candidates. We're looking for any movement in terms of who supports whom. There's things that could have happened at the debate but didn't. And so I think in that sense, I don't think we're going to be seeing numbers that are all that different than the numbers we have been seeing. We have a front runner. His name's Mondani. And until something happens in the next debate, perhaps, when we start doing another poll, we'll see if this is moving people, if some of the Cuomo arguments about inexperience and risk, whether that is taking hold. But so far it hasn't. And the numbers are fairly wide, and Mondani is right now the clear front runner.
What kinds of things would tell you if there was a debate winner?
Well, I mean, just simply we would be talking about what that impact of whatever that flub was that moved the audience. But in a sense, everybody was kind of on message, which meant why would people start changing their minds? A winner very often is if by default, if of course we think back at the Biden-Trump debate.
I don't want to.
And
do I have to?
But the Biden people didn't suddenly say, "Hey, I'm really going to vote for Trump." They just were demoralized and then felt there had to be a switch, something else. So that's how a debate can galvanize public opinion one way or another. This didn't do that. And I think what we have now is you have Cuomo, who, when we ask about favorability, he's got favorable ratings, but high negatives, which is very dangerous politically. Sliwa is less well known, and I think he probably beat expectations yesterday at the debate, and that's always a good thing to do in a debate. And I think, from Andani, he was such an unknown. I mean, Cuomo missed the fact, as if you're looking in your rearview mirror and you're the front runner, you want to see if the objects are getting closer than they appear. And in this case, Cuomo in the primary did not. So Mandani closed with his, he was picking up 10 points a week in the closing weeks before the primary. We're not seeing that kind of movement right now. We're going to go back in the field after the next debate and sort of get the collective pre-debate thing and post-debate thing and see what it looks like and see if there's any wrinkle of change. May not be all that much.
I take your point about the sort of the tenor of the debate, and there weren't these high-low moments, pretty steady. However, just sort of playing devil's advocate here, what about the fact that we know a lot of people don't tune in to political elections until the first debate?
Yeah.
So if you're a giant part of the New York City population that did not vote in the primary, and you've really kind of been tuning this all out, and you just clicked on for the first time to see who the candidates are, how do you factor that into how this debate could change the polls?
Well, we poll the population as the relevant population. So obviously in the Democratic primary, we're looking at Democrats who are likely to vote and then try to get a sense of that snapshot and project that further, up to the primary. In a general election, obviously, it's a different electorate. You're going to have more Democrats voting. You're going to have independents. You're going to have Republicans. It's a whole different group. And so the sampling, the people we, pick to be in the survey are very different. But that's okay, because that's sort of standard polling. You want to make sure that you're getting the right audience, the right population. And the key thing is to find out who's really going to vote or not. And that's not something that's copywritten. It's that's a little bit more of the art side of polling. And hopefully that's identifiable. Smaller turnout is going to work Mondani's way, unless Cuomo can suddenly change how people perceive him. And that did not happen at the debate.
And like we said, 2 weeks and change left, which in politics can be a blink of an eye, but also a lifetime. We'll see. Lee, I've got some more questions for you after the break, so don't go anywhere. Battleground NYC, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Battleground NYC. One more time for the bigger picture is Lee Miringoff, the director of Marist University Institute for Public Opinion. Lee, how many polls would you normally do for a local mayor's race? And is this race different?
Well, I think, first of all, there's a huge proliferation of polls that we're seeing, and a lot of folks are out there in the field. It does get a little confusing to the consumers of polls, the polls watchers. What do I believe? Which one might? But they're all sort of saying a similar thing. For the primary, we did two polls. One early on when Mandani was not known, and the second one about 2 weeks out, and he was closing with a vengeance at that point. And ultimately that told the tale of the tape. We have done one poll early on in this general election, and we're going to do one after the next debate. Let the debates sink in. If they have any
and
impact,
breathe.
let's see what they are.
Yeah. Okay. As we know, I think I mentioned this, just an eighth of New Yorkers turned out for the primary. I think you kind of got to this, but again, how do you poll people who didn't vote in the primary?
Okay,
but who are planning to vote in the general?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we talked a little bit about the eligibility. Obviously, you have to be registered to vote. You can be non-enrolled. You can be Democrat, Republican, what have you. And so we're really looking at generating a representative sample of the folks who are going to be determining who the next mayor is. And so we try to reach them in the way they are communicating. So we use landline, we use text to web. I mean, different methods which are going to sometimes get an older population, sometimes get a younger population. Bottom line, we want to get a microcosm of what the electorate looks like. And that should be a big indicator, particularly when you get close to the general election, as the next poll will be. Gives you a good indicator as to, is anybody moving? Keeping in mind that a poll is the snapshot. It's not necessarily a projection of those numbers that are going to be. But if the numbers are double digits between Mandani and Cuomo, then he really hadn't done what he needed to do during the debates. And I think right now it's halftime at the debates, and we've had one down, one go. And, does he go back to the drawing board? I think a lot of what he was saying is still, I've got the experience and the other guy's a risk. And the trouble with the experience argument, it's a double-edged sword for Cuomo, because you think of the experience that he has, which he's put forward, but you also think of why he left office. And so experience in and of itself. And I think you guys have already talked about the notion that Mandani doesn't look rattled. Now, if I'm going after experience, I'm not looking at someone's resume and, whether he was secretary of HUD or what have you. I want to know, what this guy's vision is for the city, and do I like him? Am I positive? For Mandani, he looks like he's totally in control of this. So why would he look green and inexperienced? It doesn't really
good point.
As an authentic argument.
I want to shift for just a minute. How or what is the polling plan for the upcoming midterms next year? And is it too early to start polling on issues right now?
No, it's not too early at all, because the participants in the political parties and the White House and the Democrats are already thinking about that, and candidates are being selected to run, and primaries, not primaries. So, it's already started. Clearly, the polls now are not going to necessarily indicate where we're going to be tomorrow, with the way the national scene changes so often and so frequently. So I think what we're looking at is some basic questions about issues. There's no mystery there. The economy remains, the dominant issue. Inflation and jobs will be what people are thinking about. There may be other issues. Obviously, the Middle East right now is important, but we have questions that sort of look at generic ballots. So are you more likely to vote for a Democrat or Republican in your congressional district? And then look at what those numbers are, compare them to other midterm elections, and see whether the Democrats or Republicans at this point are doing better than they have previously. And we sort of know how those turned out. So it's not premature to do it. It just has to be understood that this is early in terms of where we're going to be. And that's the context. All polls, you should look at the context in which the timing that they're being conducted. And so in the mayor's case, we're getting really close to the finish line. In the case of the midterm elections, it's a long way off, but it's still a relevant topic because it's a big deal.
Yes. And we're seeing how some of those races